Welcome to the start of the latest CentreCourt MBA Festival with Poets and Quants. My name is Matt Symonds. I write about business education for Forbes and various other publications and work with lots of applicants applying to the world's top business schools. And with my co-host, John Byrne, over the next 2 days, we will be welcoming the gatekeepers and the career makers, both admissions directors and career services directors from the top US, European and Asian business schools. So we're delighted that you're able to join us, whether on Zoom, and of course the opportunity to interact with all of our panelists once we've put all of our questions to them, or of course if you're following on the homepage of Poets and Quants, or catching up with this at your leisure on the YouTube channel. But delighted to have you with us in what of course promises to be another very busy year. Schools are reporting that over the last 12 months, as is often the case with an economic downturn, applications to business school have climbed. Many schools sort of double-digit growth. Now, in today's case, and we'll start this first panel focusing on the top European and Asia business schools, and Europe has already seen a lot of growth over recent years. So I'm delighted to welcome such a great panel, including Sarah Vanos. Lovely to see you again, Sarah, who's excitedly waiting for those cafes and terraces of Paris to open. Sarah is the Director of Marketing and Recruitment at HEC Paris. Joining us from Lausanne, we have Jennifer Bachelard, who is Recruitment and Admissions for IMD. And completing a European trio, Brandon Kirby, the Director of Admissions at the Rotterdam School of Management, or RSM. And also staying up late into the evening, we're delighted to have Gulnora Rakoshova, the Associate Director of Admissions at the Asia School of Business, this very exciting program that launched a few years ago with MIT Sloan. And is enjoying tremendous success in a very dynamic Southeast Asian market. Now, Sarah, just before we went live, we were talking about a very busy year, and from what you were describing, that looks set for the year ahead. Talk us through sort of the last year and applicant demand, and what your crystal ball tells you for the coming months.
So we've had a lot of applicant demand, which has been maybe frustrating for some students because unfortunately our September intake filled up very quickly. So one piece of advice would be to apply rather early this year. We do still have a round each month, but I wouldn't wait until the last minute because I think with the situation and deferrals, there's a bit of uncertainty overall. But what I've seen is really different profiles, atypical profiles we wouldn't normally see. People making a career transition that didn't expect it, but they found like this wonderful opportunity and timing to do an MBA. So that's been great. I think part of the demand and part of the reason I'm really proud to work at HEC today is that we've managed to stay in-person classes for our MBAs throughout the pandemic. So this has required a lot of planning, but we have a private walled campus. So we've put all kinds of safety precautions and measures in place. Of course, you know, from time to time, we've had to do like 1 week of online or some hybrid, of course, but students have been able to join in person for the full last, year almost. And coming September, we've just said that we'll be 100% in person should, the situation allow for it. So this is great because I think it's an important part of the experience, and it's just so nice that we were able to manage this.
Right. Now, typically, Sarah, you've got, you're unusual to have both a September and a January class start, and then a sort of a near rolling admission system. Every month there would be a deadline. So even as we look at January of 2022, but thinking ahead to September 2022, obviously advice to get started because January is already looking pretty full.
Yep. So our January intake is nearing completion. However, we're still looking for top students. So again, just don't leave it till the last moment. And our September 2022 intake, we're already starting to have applications there as well. We do have rolling deadlines. We try to manage diversity within the class. We always try to find a place for a rock star. And if, a particular intake is not available, we do have a marketing recruitment team who will speak to you and let you know what deadline can work for you and also what intake is possible.
Right. So literally rock stars or just rock stars? In
both. We have, right now we have he was actually interviewed on Poets and Quants, and we heard his interview, and he was considering HEC, and he chose us, so we're really proud. But quite a famous musician in his own field, and some other talented, ballet professionals or others. So always lovely to see that.
This is the wonderful thing. You never quite know who's going to be sitting next to you in these wonderful business schools. I guess, Jennifer, with the sort of demand that you're seeing, Anna was saying that you're actually looking to expand the class size. So, again, you have a January class start, and I guess seeing very high levels of demand.
Yes, I think to add on what Sarah was saying, we've seen similarities in terms of the demand that we're receiving, as well as the class that we're expanding a little bit thanks to COVID. We used to have only one class of 90 seats, so we capped it always at 90 people. Now we had to move our MBAs into 2 different auditoriums to make sure that the restrictions and we were compliant with the safety rules. So that allowed us to have a few more seats. So we're now, this year's intake was 98 applicants and 98 candidates. And we're looking around 100 to 110 for the incoming January intake. So again, a few more spaces there and opportunities for a little bit more people to join.
Right. So schools have sometimes commented, Jennifer, during a downturn, that they'd lost momentum with the sort of diversity, particularly the gender balance that all of you work so hard to achieve. But the reality, whether you're a 26-year-old young woman or just sort of in your early 30s, that the diversity of your class is such there's a place for everybody.
Yes, definitely. Out of our 98 candidates this year, we have 35% women, which is a little bit more than we had last year, actually. So we're trying to get there to parity slowly. And yes, the majority are between 28 and 32 with around 3 to 7 years of work experience. So that hasn't changed much. And yes, in terms of diversity, 95% are international to keep, the in-class interactions interesting.
Right. Brandon, in Rotterdam, you're at the heart of European supply chain that's kept us all delivered during the last 12 months of a pandemic and a very dynamic economy it is too. Now, again, with a January class start in 2022, you've seen, double-digit growth over the last 3, 4, 5 years. Has that continued?
Yeah, last year was a struggle. When it's one of those things where when it rains, sometimes you see the flowers come out. And for us, application volume literally doubled. I'm not saying we're unique in that regard, but I think that there was a much higher interest in returning back to getting education. And we see this, of course, after large-scale events, whether it be a financial crisis, things like that. So it continued with the trend that we had seen, a lot of the hard work that the team had been doing about getting the name of the school out there more and traveling more and meeting people face-to-face. We had really set ourselves up to weather a very difficult storm last year. We're still seeing the trend continue, though. We're still seeing strong application volume, and especially from places that we historically didn't always have a lot of application volume from. So I think that the interest of coming to Europe is still there, especially now. I think Europe was lagging a little bit behind some other parts of the world as far as COVID response, but we're starting to see again the clouds part, so to speak. So I think that Europe is really coming back to being not only an attractive alternative to other places, but an ideal place to come. So we see that still in the application volume that we have.
Right, and we'll be talking through the next 2 days of the festival to your colleagues in career services who already in recent months have shared with us at the festival a very positive picture about hiring opportunities and a dynamic economy as the world gets back on its feet. I guess Southeast Asia has been a growth story for many years now. Gulnura, what are you seeing in Malaysia and demand for the ASB program?
Well, so similar to what my other colleagues were mentioning, right? I mean, we definitely had a growth, like an application volume growing over the past year, right? I mean, and this year as well. We moved to our new campus. So our new academic building was just completed and we moved there in January. So obviously it means we can accommodate more students, which is pretty exciting doing that through the pandemic. I think Asian countries in general, especially Southeast Asian countries, managed the situation quite well. And we are seeing the trend of people like, being interested in staying in the region in Southeast Asia, especially like, we are looking at our students that are graduating this year, just because, it's quite safe and stable at this point of time. So yeah, so at ASB, right, for us, what we are planning to do is having classes in a hybrid format like we did last year, just because we know that not all international students are able to come into Malaysia for many different reasons. We also have students requesting to study online for the first few months, just because, they're not feeling it safe to move anywhere at this point of time. But yeah, other than that, we are feeling very, very positive, expecting to have another big class this incoming intake in August.
Right. And of course, you've got this wonderful format where, MIT Sloan professors that are joining you, presumably everybody's had to adapt, but I mean, faculty have been just as engaged on Zoom or whatever platforms that we're using, and sort of it's been an uninterrupted learning process.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's been a challenge with the time zone constraints, right? Knowing that we are very international, 70% of our students are international. But at the same time, I think it's another learning opportunity for them, right? It's an opportunity to grow, like, being agile. And yeah, for the faculty, like resident faculty, obviously they are teaching from Malaysia. Sometimes they had to teach in the middle of the night, sometimes super early morning, just because we try to make sure we accommodate pretty much like as many international students as possible. But of course, with MIT faculty, obviously they operate like, based on the US time zone, which means they were teaching classes, when it was late night for us, for Malaysia. But we were able to manage it quite well, I think. Students by now, in the beginning, of course, there was like a lot of frustration going on that I have to take classes in the middle of the night or I have to wake up super early. But by now, like, the whole world is living in this situation, right? It's not only one business school. I think my colleagues would say the same thing. So you just live with it, right? Hoping that it's going to come to an end soon.
Right.
So, yeah.
Now, Sarah, I guess politicians and experts in the media may disagree of when the pandemic started, or in fact, when it might end. We hope soon, of course. But if I go back to January 2020, that's 16 months. And 16 months is the length of the HEC Paris program. So in the time of a COVID pandemic, I could have been through the program, developed this fantastic network. I suppose it just illustrates to me what a great opportunity at any time, downturn or otherwise, to invest in yourself and head to business school. Why does 16 months really resonate with HEC?
Yeah, if you're looking as an MBA student, it's probably one of the first things that you start thinking about. Do I want to study for a year, 2 years? It's kind of a dilemma because, you want to get the most out of the experience, but it's also expensive to take time off work. So we tried to find a happy medium between the two. So you get the benefits of a 2-year program, like you can do a specialization, you can also do electives, you can do an internship, but you finish a little sooner. So if you were to start in September, you finish by January. If you start in January, you finish by June. So I think it's kind of like a happy mixture of the two, better overall return on investment, but you still get that time to develop yourself. I think it really depends though on your career goals. Some people want to accelerate their studies, finish really quickly, get back to work quickly. Others need that time for a personal and professional transformation. So if you want to change, your industry, your sector, your function, learn a language, move countries, I think if you can afford yourself that bit of extra time, it's just all the more memorable. And it's so rare that you can take time off to go back to school. Personally, I did the HEC Paris MBA and it was the most wonderful time, but I didn't get to concentrate on it fully because I still had to work. So I think it's just something that anyone who can afford to do it should. It's like a very, very privileged, expensive endeavor, with very rewarding, but I think it's just incredible, the people that can follow a full-time MBA.
Whenever I talk to graduates, and Jennifer, whether it's IMD alum, and I sort of say, well, what do you wish that you had known, as you had begun the program, given that intensity, given there's so many things that they can do both in the classroom and beyond the classroom, they often say, well, prioritizing my time was absolutely essential. You really fit a lot into the 12-month program, don't you?
Yes, we do have the 2-year kind of MBA in 1 year, in 10 months, actually. We've taken out kind of the internship part. You have a month in the summer to kind of maybe take a step back. After the first 6 months, it's pretty immersive. It's pretty full on with packed days. You have on top of the core work, you have the leadership stream with your psychoanalyst sessions, you have your startup company to work and develop as well. You have some innovation lab, you have a digital lab, so it's all like week-long immersive projects on top of the kind of core work and on top of the cases, on top of the group dynamics and finding yourself and your leadership style within each group you're working with. So you come to the summer, you have that month off, and some decide to and get an opportunity to do an internship. That's great. What we would suggest is also to take a step back, understand kind of the transformation journey that you've been on so far, see kind of how much you've changed, and use that time also for the networking, to kind of understand where you want to go, work on your network, get your peers involved, our career as well, so that in the second part of the year where you're going to be working again with companies on the ICP, which is our international consulting project for 2 months, working fully for a company, and then you have the electives, and then you're kind of, December is here, and you're done. So yes, definitely, I think from what alumni have said, wow, you know, I've never learned so much about myself than I have in this 1 year, and to kind of fully take advantage of everything that comes your way and have an open mind. I think that would be their statement there for anybody applying, going through the program, and I'm sure for any program, kind of have an open mind and be ready to take in everything that is thrown at you and that comes your way.
Right, and that sort of adaptability. Now, Brandon, of course, as we think about the last year, you've been able to maintain sort of, you know, weekly campus presence and that touch point, you know, combining that with some online materials. As we sort of emerge from this with a deeply international program at RSM, do you think that sort of, you know, you've got a very pragmatic skills that you'll be able to apply in a business setting? Do you think that the curriculum will sort of evolve to reflect, you know, what you might then do offline, and how you then optimize the time that this wonderful bunch of students is coming together in the classroom?
Well, I think if a school doesn't reflect on the past, you know, 16 to 18 months and look for those opportunities to build those things into the program, whether that be from a functional perspective of how you're delivering classes or the kinds of content that you're delivering, I think that you're sort of doing, you know, the students that are going to your program a disservice. And I think that at the same time, though, a lot of the things that that help you be successful post-program remain unchanged. So if you think about the adaptability, the resilience, the flexibility, you know, dealing with uncertainty, you know, these are all things that companies look for, especially in their leadership. So in that regard, I think that some things are universal and don't necessarily change. I can tell you that, you know, especially with how we approach careers and with the work that we do with students there, of course, that has to change a lot because unfortunately the ability to network in person hasn't been there as it has been for previous cohorts. So what we've been doing is looking at those areas where there are obvious sort of gaps between the way it was in the past and the way it's going to be in the future, and identifying ways to do things differently to plug those gaps, if you will, and to take a different approach. So I think it's a blend, you know, recognizing that things will in some ways never be the same, but then also recognizing that those skills that are required to be successful in business have in some ways been reinforced, you know, during these times. And for us, you know, this is our second cohort, like most of my colleagues that have gone through, you know, a very challenging time. So that's how we've been approaching it. And I do think that there is still a lot of overlap between sort of the pre-COVID and COVID, and then what will hopefully eventually become whatever we call the post-COVID world. Yeah, but that's what I think about that.
The dean at ASB, Gulnura, has often talked about a sort of a pioneer spirit, and you're mixing the academic rigor and excellence of MIT Sloan with a very dynamic sort of action learning program in Malaysia. So bringing those cultures together, what does that mean that you're looking for? How do you identify a pioneer spirit, as Sean likes to describe it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think being frontier minded, right? I mean, seeing where the world is going. Also, as you mentioned, action learning, right? I mean, so which means our students work with real businesses across Southeast Asia and beyond, on real problems, solving real problems, right? I mean, so it means getting your hands dirty, being on the ground. So, you know, a lot of times when people think of jobs, like, for example, like, you know, being an expat, for example, they think of something that is fancy, right? I mean, but it means you have to be in a factory sometimes, right? I mean, actually managing a lot of things. If you are doing, like, for example, a project in aviation with an airline, right? I mean, so, or like, you know, we had a group of students doing a project on a remote part of the country, right? I mean, so like basically in the jungles. So being frontier minded means, right? I mean, being willing to do that, yet being open-minded, being risk-taking, right? I mean, being open to taking risks, all kinds of risks. So I think these are the things, like, you know, what we are looking for when it comes to our program, just because when you're doing action learning projects, right? I mean, you cannot be expecting just to sit in the office building. You have to be on the ground many times. And what I usually tell people, in Southeast Asia, one market is so different from another one. If you are doing a project in Singapore, it's not the same as doing a project in Myanmar, where, for example, a group of students had to hire a translator to get the work done, right? I mean, so if you are not open-minded, if you're not flexible, right? I mean, if you're not frontier-minded, if you're not willing to get your hands dirty, right? I mean, you're not going to succeed. And it's not just about the MBA experience, right? I mean, but it kind of defines your professional and, like, you know, personal kind of settings and the growth opportunities as well. If you're willing to do that, right? I mean, you grow as a person a lot in a different way, right? I mean, then if you're sitting, like, you know, in a nice office building, like, you know, doing just like, you know, traditional internship. So I think this is something that what we define as, you know, being pioneers, being there, doing the things.
I suppose as I think about the CentreCourt audience, Sarah, you know, we'll have viewers from all over the world. It's 9:30 in Malaysia. It's sort of mid-evening in Bangalore. They're just waking up in Boston. So the US president has says, okay, from now, if you've had your 2 vaccines, no need to wear a mask. Whereas in India, you know, the virus cases have risen very rapidly in coming weeks. So as an admissions team at HEC, working with applicants all over the world that are perhaps in very different situations, you know, some GMAT test centers have closed down. How do you sort of keep up with all of those events and ensure that, you know, individuals, you can give them the time and also sort of the flexibility and understanding of the different circumstances they might find themselves in?
Yeah, so I think communication is really key here, letting students know what to expect, kind of what the rules are, what they can expect if they wish to follow classes, defer, etc. So at HEC in particular, we do allow students to defer as long as the next intake isn't full to the intake of their choice. And of course, if there's a tuition difference, they would have to pay, but it's usually like 1,000 or 2,000 euros. So it's not a significant increase. We do allow them to do this up until 1 month before, and it makes it a little bit difficult to control in terms of diversity in the classroom because, you know, we hope that students can follow. We encourage them to follow and to respect their start times, but we are offering, so we expect students to be present in September 100% in person, unless exceptionally they can't travel to France. If that's the case, they can exceptionally start online and join as soon as possible. This gives them the flexibility of having the choice of starting if something happens, if, you know, managing all these difficult situations, because we want them to have a great experience. I think we're lucky in that we have a relatively small class and 2 intakes to sort of divide that class. So moving from September to January, it's not the end of the world. It's just delaying your MBA by 4 months, starting a little earlier, a little later. And what we've noticed is that while some defer and wish to start later, we also have others that wish to start earlier. So far it's kind of balanced itself out. Luckily, I don't know, you know, how that's going to look this year. And I really hope that everyone is able to have the vaccine and that everyone can get back on track. But if not, at least they have options and they're not committed to arriving on a certain day if they can't. Got it.
Yeah. And just in terms of what you've all faced in an admissions office in such testing circumstances, Jennifer, of course, IMD with the assessment days that you would run, your full days in, whether in Lausanne, whether in Singapore, different locations around the world. How have you adapted that sort of high touch model of really getting to know applicants to the virtual realities of the last 12 months?
Yes, definitely. That changed a little bit. We were flying all over the place and trying to have either assessment days on our campus for those that were able to travel, and that way have a look at our campus as well, see our current MBAs and have lunch with them. But those that weren't able to, we would go closer to them so that they could have their assessment day abroad. Obviously, with the pandemic, we had to close that down, and we have been doing them online now. So it's about a 5-hour Zoom session for our assessment days. What we did notice, yeah, long for everyone, but it gives at the end of that you're reassured that we're taking the right people, and for those applying as well, that it is the right place for them. So I think it's a win-win situation for both, but definitely it's a long day. We have noticed that we get similarly the same information from when we do it in person as to when we have it online. We've changed the format a little bit. Some of the activities have been tweaked, but yeah, it's the same information we get. So in terms of our kind of understanding and our fit with the program, we were able to keep that afloat. Yeah.
Right. And that sense of fit, Brandon, you talked about, getting applications in the last year from, maybe sectors, perhaps less traditional feeders into business school, and certainly from, corners of the world that perhaps you hadn't connected with in the past. As you think about the diversity that you're looking to bring together in the classroom, perhaps for you, what are the fundamentals of fit for you to say, yeah, I could really see this individual thriving in the RSM MBA classroom?
Yeah, usually there's three things. Being open to change, I think, is one of the biggest things. Open to changing yourself and change of those around you. Being open to challenging yourself. If for example, that finance is in your area of expertise, that you're open to finding those ways to challenge yourself and to learn more and to challenge others too. We often talk about how well our cohorts get along and how they become family. But I think oftentimes we forget, even within a family, there can be, difficult moments and moments of tension. And I think sometimes the real learning can come out of those moments of heated discussion in the classroom, either about a controversial topic that people are very passionate about. Still being able to respect one another's views, because I think that when you have, as all of us do in our programs, very diverse and international cohorts, there are people coming with so many different backgrounds and experiences, and what's acceptable in one place might not be acceptable in another. And seeing how those discussions play out. In the beginning, it can be challenging as you're sort of trying to find your way. And I think that goes along with the third one, which is seeing everything as an opportunity to learn. Oftentimes we think about, again, the benefits and the good times, but there's also some moments in an MBA program where there'll be some dark moments. That's what happens, because it's designed to do that. Even outside of COVID times, the stress, the pressure, the anxiety, these are the things that I think the famous saying, a diamond is formed under pressure. It's sort of the same concept. And there will be moments where you get a grade you might not be happy with, or the team you've been assigned isn't functioning the way that you want it to. The students that see that as an opportunity and try to find ways to work with that, to work through that, and to find the positives, if you will, are, I think, really critical. And really, when that comes into play when you're looking for job placement afterwards, because you're not always going to be working on a team that is a high performing team. You're not always going to be working with others that perform up to the standard that you do or not. And so individuals who have that mentality early on within the program and really solidify that do well in the program, because they're able to let those things kind of flow through them, as opposed to sort of hitting them and really pushing them back or pushing them down. So this is something that we look for in the admissions process, through the questions that we ask in the interview, through some different things that we do in the admissions process. But I think those are the three things: open to change, open to challenge, and then seeing everything as a learning opportunity. Beyond the, wanting to make an impact. And I mean, I think a lot of us would say that too, but when I really distill it down beyond buzzwords and things like that, these are the three things that if I look at the most successful candidates in the program who went on to have very successful careers afterwards, they have those three things in common.
Well, perhaps we can use that then as a segue in terms of the admissions process, for 4 world-class business schools that are seeing record application volume. And Gulnur, many applicants will approach the whole admissions process, and of course I need to show strong academics, and we'll talk about test scores in a little bit, like recommenders, but this idea that everything needs to shine in the application. And yet what Brandon is describing is also how you thrive in those difficult moments and the challenges. So in an application, is there room to show vulnerability, or that not everything was perfect, but it's how you then overcame that challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why you're coming to do an MBA, right? If you're so good at everything, if you're perfect, why you need an MBA? And I think this is like one of the things that we see with a lot of people. Sometimes they try to oversell themselves, right? I mean, not trying to explain why an MBA. So if you're planning to do an MBA, it doesn't matter what kind of school you're joining, right? I mean, what kind of country you're going to be doing it at. You have a goal, right? I mean, you have a reason why you want to be immersed in that experience. So you have to indicate that. And immersing yourself in the experience is not just taking from the school, but also giving back to the school, right? I mean, in terms of, I'm not really good at this, but this is how, MBA is going to help me to get to my whatever dream career or whatever it is. And I think this is something that a lot of people are missing. At least this is something that I've been seeing as a trend with some people from certain regions, right? I mean, when they try to put in a nice application, nice CV, recommendation letters, and it's just so perfect. Then you're like, why an MBA? And this is something that you would question during the interview, right? I mean, what are you hoping to get out of your MBA experience? You probe their weaknesses and strengths as well. And sometimes people talk about their strengths, but they forget mentioning their weaknesses, right? I mean, they only try to mention something that sounds nice as a weakness. But then being, as Brendan mentioned, right? I mean, when you're immersed in a very dynamic setting, right? I mean, with classmates coming from all over the world, you may think that you are really good at something, but there might be somebody who's even better than you are, right? I mean, in whatever it is. And also, when it comes to cultural experiences, I think this is also like, you have to keep in mind that especially if you're a foreign student, if you're joining a program that's in the other country, that's a great opportunity for you, right? I mean, to show what are you planning to get from your classmates, being in that country, being in that setting. So yeah, absolutely. I think everyone, when you're applying to an MBA program, you have to showcase some of those things and like your weaknesses.
Right, and with average GPAs and average GMAT and GRE scores, Sarah, presumably, bless you, if you published the average height of your students, there'd be some people panicking that they're not 5'4" or 1.80 m, whatever the averages are this year. I mean, just talk us through a far more holistic process, and how there's no one component that gets you in or disqualifies you.
Yeah, we look at students, of course, overall across many different facets. The GMAT GRE is a very small part, but it is an important part. And this is a common question we've been getting lately. We don't plan to waive it. We didn't waive it during COVID. It will still be a requirement. So I think this is something that candidates need to explore, because there are different schools who are kind of thinking about changing these rules. So for us, it's still a small but important part of the application. Otherwise, we look at the CV, career progression. What have you been doing in the time you've been working? Even if you only have 2 years of experience, what did you do in that time? So just communicate that clearly with us. What are your career goals? Why an MBA? So of course, we want to help you achieve the transformation that you're looking for. So we try to assess, is this possible with a lot of hard work on our part and on your work part? We look at languages. So if there's a specific country you're targeting, do you have that language? Do you plan on learning that language? References are a really important part. So most schools ask for references. We prefer professional references. So that would be, instead of like a classmate or a professor, someone that you've worked with, typically someone who's supervised you, or it can be a client. We also look at essays. So these are kind of the bulk of the general things that you can tick off when you apply. But the final decision we leave up to our alumni. So you'll have 2 individual alumni interviews if you're successful in the first part, and they're assessing fit. So like Brandon was explaining, that really essence of HEC, do you have it? Would I want you in my class, and vice versa? So yeah, it's a huge amount of tiny things that all work together to make your application great. And we're happy to discuss in depth, if you're targeting HEC Paris, the specifics that we look for.
And Jennifer, sort of taking that a step further, even when people look at the average age of the class, there's a range, and people in their mid-20s, early 30s. But equally, as you think, even with the growing numbers and admitting the biggest class in January 2022, there's no point second guessing and saying, well, have they got the demographic representation they need from this country already? It's you as an individual and how you would fit and contribute to the IMD community.
Exactly. We don't have any quotas. So it's not because we have only 3 American spots that once that's done, then there's no more chance for the others. So we really, similarly to what Sarah was saying, we have a holistic approach as well when we go through our first steps of the online application with the recommenders as well from recent work positions or a mentor, somebody that knows you well professionally. We look at, of course, the GMAT, but also the essay, which is this year on a leadership failure. So we want to see, like Gulnura was saying, you know, we don't want the picture perfect self of you. So we want to see how we can help you and help you get to that next stage of your career post MBA. So we'll look at that. And then with our second process, which is the assessment day, that's where really, like I was mentioning, we're going to get to know you on an individual side. We're going to see what you've done, or your achievements through work, how involved are you with your community, how much of a difference you want to make in the world, what is your drive, and all of that together with the assessment, how you interact with the others of that day, so that we make sure that there is a good fit between everyone. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, because I think so often, and even perhaps just in terms of, sometimes we see an imposter syndrome of then imagining that everybody else will be so much brighter, so much more experienced. And yet, you as your admissions expert, your admissions, you're not rejection, and finding that sort of alignment and the great fit with the program.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if anyone is not sure, then reach out to us. We have, you know, we book a call with any of our advisors from your area, and happy to go through your CV and see kind of any flags that there could be, or anything that you should work on before you apply. Any doubts about your GMAT, we do require it, but we're a little bit more lenient, as you were mentioning, from different areas of the world that is not possible at the moment. We'll enter a discussion with each person to make sure that that we can work with what there is to work with, to make sure. Yeah. Great.
Now, it's always a good time to invest in yourself, but you know, Brandon, you sort of said that application volume has doubled. Obviously, that's a challenge. It's a nice problem to have with such a great applicant pool. You put together a great series of videos, sort of talking applicants through the different pieces of the application to RSM. As you sort of think about anyone that's watching today and has, you know, in the coming weeks or months, they want to put in an application, what would be your top piece of advice?
Tell us a good story, because, you know, there are a lot of people that you're going to be competing with who have, you know, what's the difference between a 620 and a 640, or a 710 and a 680 GMAT? Maybe that day the set of questions that you had just fell in your favor, or maybe the person that took the, you know, so, and I think that's to Sarah's point. Look, we all look at the GMAT, we do, but it is not, I think, for, unless you have some ridiculously weak score, you know, then you're still going to be in the conversation usually. And so telling us a story is really going to set you apart from the other people. And oftentimes when I talk to candidates, I say, look, spend more time thinking about your application or thinking about your essay than actually doing it. So think about if you know, we used to have an essay question that used to ask you, what was your most difficult decision? And so we got a wide range of answers to that question. And so I would challenge people to think about, you know, why are you selecting this particular response to this? Tell us the story behind it, about you and what you learned. So I think that those are the critical things, because again, everyone is going to try to trump up a little bit. I don't mean the president, I mean trump up, like make it out to be more than it is. Like you were on a project that, well, maybe it wasn't a 10 million euro churn, maybe it was 15. But at the end of the day, you know, this isn't a job application. It doesn't necessarily matter how much you oversaw necessarily, right? So tell us about, okay, great. So you had this churn. So what were some challenges that you learned, or how did you lead a team to effectively achieve that goal? Telling us a story can take those numbers that we see on a page of a GPA, a GMAT, or whatever those things might be, and really provides the life behind it. Because again, when you sit in the classroom, you're not a number. And quite frankly, after the first few weeks, when you ask your colleagues in the classroom what their GMAT was, no one's going to care. you know, and when you move into with few exceptions, there are some industries that will bring back your GMAT score when they're looking at you and evaluating you for job positions. But who you are as an individual is going to matter far more than anything else. Now, it's easy to say that sitting on this side of the table, but you know, you have to trust a little bit in the process that tell us who you are and a story about what makes you unique and you know, what makes you tick. Because then if you are on the fence and you're looking at candidates, you want that emotional attachment when you're sitting there in an admissions committee, because oftentimes the people in the admissions committee haven't met you sometimes. They see you as a piece of paper. And so you need to be able to communicate to these individuals who haven't seen you who you are. Otherwise they're going to be, oh, well, here's Brandon. He had a 580 from the US. Oh, and here's, you know, Sarah, she's from Canada and she had a, you don't want it to come down to that. So having a story and keeping it tight is, I think, really critical when you're really trying to cut through, especially with lots of applications, especially these days.
All of you speak to, I suppose, what is actually a wonderful opportunity for anybody, you know, to step back. If you know, you've been working in the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is, you know, to step back for the sort of self-reflection, you know, about the impact that you had in that particularly challenging churn, whatever it is. Now, often as we sort of start with a piece of paper, you know, the resume or the CV, Gulnura, that of course is part of the application. Many of us will have developed that initially for finding a job. As we then think about it in terms of applying to business school, how are we then looking to maybe share part of Brandon's story through bullet points, growth, development? What are we trying to capture in the resume?
Well, yeah, I think one of the main points of the resume to tell your story, right? I mean, as Brandon said, but a lot of times people just do not even format it in a proper way. I know, like, you know, from country to country, it could be different, right? I mean, but there are some universal standards. So because this is the first thing that the admissions team is going to see, right? I mean, it's going to be your resume. And of course, if it's not properly formatted, it's going to be really hard for them to see what you're trying to highlight. Customizing resume, right? I mean, we also see that sometimes people use the same resume that they use, like, you know, when they're looking for jobs for MBA admissions. The purpose of the resume for MBA admissions and for looking at when you're looking for a job, you know, it's a different thing. So you have to make sure you take that into account. When it comes to your bullet points, right? I mean, what makes you unique, right? I mean, so it's not just your achievements, but also what makes you unique. Like, you know, if you're working in a company, or whether it's a startup, whether it's a large MNC, whatever it is, right? I mean, what are you getting out of it, right? I mean, so it's not just highlighting your achievements, but also kind of, you know, portraying your story in the, you know, in a way that we see what kind of person you are, highlighting your, I don't know, whatever volunteering experiences, right? I mean, some leadership activities. We are looking for, you know, what kind of impact you've made in the company, right? I mean, what kind of impact you made in the school, or, you know, I don't know, in like volunteering or doing any kind of other things. So I think how versatile you are, right? I mean, this is another thing that your resume can tell us. So spending a lot of time on your resume is critical. And we do see that, you know, sometimes applicants, right? I mean, they do not recognize the importance of that. They're trying just to put the highlights, right? You know, this is, as Brendan said, right? I mean, this is how much money, like, you know, I was able to make for the company. But sometimes sometimes seeing things like, you know, for example, we had a new teammate or new teammates, right? I mean, or expanding the business, right? I mean, to another market. And I was one of those people leading that. Or, you know, we had new employees coming into the team, right? I mean, and I was able to manage them, mentor them, right? I mean, and get them to another level. It's also some kind of achievement that people do tend to forget to highlight in their application and in their resume as well. So I don't know if this is exactly what you were hoping for me to answer, but this is how.
I mean, you also spoke to how, you know, compared to perhaps applying for a job where you might have lots of technical terms, you know,
exactly, yep.
Coding languages and other things that simply wouldn't be relevant. Now, as we contrast that trajectory, Sarah, with the voice of a recommender, and sometimes, you know, recommenders, it can be a source of anxiety because, you know, you weren't quite ready to tell your boss that you're thinking about heading to business school, or maybe even a culture that doesn't seem to be supportive of the MBA. Talk us through, you know, who you like to hear from and the sort of insights and perspectives that are really then valuable to you to get that better understanding of the applicant.
So the referee will have like a series of questions that are set. and the school will email that to them. So that's kind of the process. You'll give us the name, we'll invite them to respond, they'll respond to us. Typically the best references, of course, are professional, someone who actually knows you, who's managed you, or they're a client. It's true, sometimes your current boss, you might not want to tell them, like, I'm thinking about leaving, I'm thinking about going to business school. If it's a previous boss, it's okay. Even if it was 2 bosses ago, or if it's a client, or if it's someone that you work with closely. A common mistake would be, often we see people who go to like the CEO of their company, or someone in their company who's really high up, but they don't actually know them. And I would say it's better to have someone that knows you instead of seniority. So we don't look at the seniority of the position. We look more like, are you a direct report? How have you worked with them? And that's kind of how we rate the references in general. We ask the references, do they find you outstanding or subpar? What do they think your best and worst qualities are? So one tip might be to discuss with your reference, I'm looking to go to business school. Do you support me? Do you feel that you would recommend me? Because sometimes people ask bad references, and I think it's because they didn't have that conversation and they assume this person has great things to say about them. So on our end, we just look at your references in terms of what they are. So I think it's okay to have that conversation. Do you think I would be good in business school? Would you be happy to recommend me? Just so that the person gives you a good reference, because often if you don't have that conversation, it can be a little bit risky. So I would say those would be maybe my tips on references.
So just getting their sort of buy-in and know that they'll be truly supportive. Jennifer, with such an international applicant pool, that also implies international recommenders too. Maybe speaking to them, and then just for applicants from around the world, your cultural understanding. A Norwegian recommender may not be as effusive as their American counterpart, or even perhaps culturally how some people have a sort of a modesty about sort of speaking to their accomplishments. So are you always then trying to sort of anticipate and think, well, this might be cultural?
Yes, of course. I think we need to understand where the recommendation is coming from. Different cultures have different ways of responding. Some really spread out and tell a whole story. Others do bullet points. I think Sarah mentioned a lot of great points. Similarly, we also ask for, when you're applying, to enter your business email address of the recommender, who will then receive a link to a small form with similar questions as well, and questions such as, where they see you in 5-10 years time, what your strengths are, what capacity do you work with that person. And so I think the same as Sarah, there's no real point of going to a professor if you were in school 10 years ago. They just won't portray the person that you are now. But you can go to a mentor, you could go to a client, it could be a peer, someone that knows you professionally well. And I think Sarah had a point to make sure that you do ask that person that they will be receiving the link in order to already have had that conversation beforehand. And then we look at it, whether it's bullet points or a whole full story. We'll take out of it what we need to.
Right. And by the time that you then join the MBA classroom, you'll be surrounded by this wonderfully diverse, talented, open-minded, ambitious bunch of classmates that perhaps, Brandon, have displayed the sort of openness and curiosity that you were describing earlier. So an applicant doesn't have to have everything then worked out. In terms of post-MBA career goals, it's not that they'll be in this position at Unilever within 18 months and then trace the next 10 years of their career. What are you looking for? Just a level of sort of perhaps self-awareness given a background, and how the MBA fits in at this stage?
And there's a few things. I mean, I can count probably on 2 hands and 2 feet how many people say during the interview phase, or even during the pre-applicant phase, when you're having conversations on the road or with people, saying, well, I want to be a consultant in this field and that. Very rarely, and it does happen, but I mean, people change their minds, right? Mm-hmm. Someone might think, oh, you know what, I really want to be a consultant. That's a common thing I think most of us hear. Consulting is not for everybody, right? And there's sometimes a romanticized vision of certain industries, whether it be the video game industry, advertising, music, consulting. But then when you pull the curtain back and you see really what it's about, some people are like, yes, I want that, absolutely. Other people are like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, the pay's really good, but I kind of value my life and well-being. So I don't think I'm going to do that. And we have that happen every year. And that's okay, because that's what this is about. This is about, again, exploring, what you want to do and trying some new things out. Maybe you're trying to pivot in your career and everything else. So for me, what I tell candidates is, look, what you do after an MBA can change. All right, so what job you have, that can always change, but why you're doing an MBA should not change throughout the course of doing an MBA. That's sort of the guiding light, the lighthouse in the storm, so to speak, that keeps you on track and headed in the right direction. And so understanding the why, and I know that's a famous book and blah, blah, but understanding that from that perspective is really important, because the what will most likely change. And that could be based on a variety of factors. But at the end of the day, do we have people that come in and from the moment they set foot on campus to the moment they left, they knew they wanted to be a certain thing and they accomplish it? Absolutely. You sometimes have to put in a lot of effort to do so. But oftentimes people get in and they say, you know what? What's more important for me actually is living in Europe. I want the European lifestyle. And I did want to do it in a particular field, but for whatever reason, it's not working out. But you know what? During the program, I found out I really liked accounting. Who knew? So I'm going to explore this particular field. So again, what you want to do afterwards can change, but the why you do a program, that should remain consistent. And I think that starts with way back when you're applying for schools, understanding why you're going back to business school. And if it's just about finding, getting a higher paycheck, you really might want to take a step back and consider, is doing an MBA the best thing? Because yes, that will most likely happen, but it's so much more than that. So understand why you're doing an MBA.
And as we look at that journey, perhaps just a word to viewers that you're sending in some great questions. I'm going to bring them in the sort of the closing section of this panel. And of course, don't forget that once we're done, our panelists will be available for individual chats. So, questions that you had about scholarships, financing, all of these different, that's a great opportunity to address them specifically to our panel. But when we think about the journey that Brandon is describing, Gulnur, and you sort of see that person that you admitted last year and where they are today, what do we see there? Is it sort of personal confidence, growth, just an optimism and risk taking? What are the sort of trajectories that you love to be able to see from that person you admitted to the person that graduated?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we are doing admissions, right? I mean, because we see that journey, and it's really amazing to be able, to see how people's mindset changes, right? I mean, how they learn to work with different cultures, how they're learning to multitask, how they learn to be risk taken, right? I mean, the level of versatility changes, right? I mean, in terms of their careers, their, personal, whatever, opportunities that they see, right? I mean, whatever it is. So they work on different projects, for example, in our program, right? I mean, and one of the things that people say, I never thought that I could do that, right? I mean, as Brenda mentioned, some people want to go into consulting, right? I mean, they do things similar to consulting, and they come to understanding this is not what they want to do, but they find passion in something else. And you're part of that journey, just as an admissions person, because you see that, right? I mean, when you are interviewing people, when you're interacting with them, you see that potential in them. And going through that experience, being an admin, being a student, and being the graduate, right? I mean, their whole world changes. They're immersed in a different dynamic setting, right? I mean, they are surrounded by different people with different mindsets, different life experiences. Like we had, for example, one of our alums who used to be a professional musician. He came to an MBA program just because he was looking for transformative experience. And as he graduated, he joined one of the quasi-governmental companies in the top management level. And for him, for somebody who never had that experience, right? I mean, when you see that, his whole journey, his whole transformational journey, it's amazing. And when you're part of that experience, right? I mean, when you're part of, his life changes, I think that's quite amazing. And the other thing, I feel like humility, right? I mean, in being cross-cultural savvy, sometimes people come to an MBA program thinking that they're superstars, and then they meet their classmates who are coming probably from humble backgrounds, right? I mean, and this is how you learn and how you understand that, humility is a key as well. For some people, it's actually the opposite, gaining confidence. Like in Asia, as you know, for many people, they're not as vocal as, for example, students from Western countries, and they learn to speak up. They learn to voice their opinions. It's another great story. Like, you know, when you see some of our students, for example, some of Malaysian students, majority, I would say, Malaysian students, they tend not to even ask questions during class. But over time, you see that they are the ones who are driving the conversations and discussions in the classroom setting, while some of the Western students learn how to back up, right? And give the others the chance to do that. So I think that's a pretty amazing experience to observe. And I think that's like, you know, why we are doing admissions. I think that's a very rewarding job to see the personal and professional growth in our students.
Well, if all of you have these musicians in your MBA classroom, but alongside the bankers and the consultants and the software engineers, maybe for the 21st of June, which France has as Fête de la Musique with poets and quants, we'll have to do a special dedication to the museum, the musicians of the MBA. Sarah, Gulnara used a phrase that I've heard HEC graduates use before, life-changing. And perhaps when you're on the side of thinking about applying to business school and everything that it entails, it's quite hard to grasp. And yet, you know, you've been in the classroom, you're also in recruitment for the school. Why is it life-changing?
I think it's life-changing because it pushes you in so many different ways that you would never have pushed yourself. It pushes you in terms of group work, of understanding others, of appreciating others, of coming things from a different viewpoint, and learning about people from tons of different professional backgrounds as well as countries. So there's all this kind of stuff, you know, in the classroom. You're also getting this knowledge, then you're applying the knowledge. Personally, also, sometimes I guess when you go back to the MBA, you're really good at some things. Like maybe you did marketing previously, but then you get in your corporate finance class. And it's kind of like running a marathon where you're like, can I do this? Am I going to make it? And then you make it. And it's just the most incredible feeling. And you come out and you don't have that feeling very often in your professional life where you really were like, can I face this? Can I do this? You have all these people supporting you. So I would say that's why it's life-changing. You're pushed out of your comfort zone, but then you're like, okay, I made it. I did that. And you feel like you can kind of do anything because you have this support, this network, these people that believe in you, and then they're there for the rest of your life. So I would say overall, yeah, that would be just kind of maybe a little bit about why.
Yeah, yeah. And Jennifer, I mean, do you have a favorite story? Perhaps someone who had those sort of, you know, the doubt of, can I achieve this? And when you see, you know, where you believed in them, offered them a place in the program, and, you know, look where they've taken that. Do you have a favorite story?
So many, they're all coming to me, but and none is sticking. I could see. I had a few years back a Brazilian that applied to our program. He was sponsored by his company, very shy, kind of specialized in his field, but not really management, hadn't done any management kind of position yet. So he came very shy into the program, and by the end of it, he was a completely transformed person, super assertive. He grew as a person, he grew as a team player, he grew as a leader, and then was taken back by his company, and now is kind of co-directing the company. And I remember him saying as well, like, well, I came back to my job and people couldn't recognize me anymore. They were impressed at how in 1 year, out of the 8 years that he had done in that company before, in that 1 year at IMD, his whole personality had, you know, just taken a flight, and yeah, I was ready then to really manage people and take that next step. So it's really rewarding when we see people like that. You're going to be, you know, in a room with amazing peers that have great stories, great experiences. There might be a job that you never even thought existed, and then when speaking to that person, you're like, I think I could be good at that. Let me, you know, I wanted to go into this field, but actually maybe this is not a bad idea for me. So it's good to have that open mind and that transformative journey that you will definitely go through, and become the next person a year from now.
Right. Well, with the enthusiasm and the insights that the four of you have shared, I defy anyone to not want to sort of reach out and find out more about each of the schools. I have one final very personal question for Brandon. I know Brandon, within RSM for the last over 10 years, whether it's the students, MBA, masters, undergrad, the staff, I think even people visiting the school, they make a statement, sort of a goal-setting statement, and it's I will, and then your MBA students work on what it is that they will commit to or do. What is your I will statement, Brandon?
Oh boy, I haven't gone back to that one in a while, actually. I've been so focused on other things. It's I will grow brands. And I know that might sound, I'll say it again, I will grow brands. My sort of what makes me tick is I really enjoy, in my previous life, I did a lot around advertising and branding. And so my time at RSM has been spent sort of doing two things. As you mentioned at the beginning of the call, I'm the director of admissions, but I'm also the director of marketing for our MBA and executive education programs. So a lot of my career has been built on helping brands grow, whether that be companies that I've run or companies that I've worked for. And some of the things I'm most proud of during the time that I've been at RSM is working with the team on the marketing side, either through campaign developments or other things to really grow the brand of RSM. And I think that last year was a testament to the work that team has done in addition to admissions of really helping to increase the presence of RSM around the world, whether that be through smart marketing or traveling more and getting out there. So my I will statement is I grow brands. We have about 10,000 plus, I think, that we've done over the years. Some of them are very serious. Some of them are a little tongue in cheek, but I think that's the point, is that you can sort of make it to be what you want to be. And I think that's a good allegory for the MBA. The MBA is about making it what you want it to be. Yes, there are courses that we want you to take. So there is some of that path that is set out for you, but during the course of a 1 or 2 year program, you really have a lot of opportunities to kind of shape and create the MBA experience that you want. And of course, it starts with the school that you decide to go with. But if you put some attention to it along the way, no matter what you do afterwards, you'll come out okay.
Right. So my question to our viewers is, what will you achieve with that one wonderful life that you have, and where might business school fit into that journey? Certainly with the insights that our panelists have shared in the last hour, I think it really encourages you to think about, what do you want as a sense of purpose and what you can achieve, because clearly these 4 wonderful schools are part of that picture. So I encourage you in the next hour to go into those individual chat sessions with Sarah, with Jennifer, with Gulnura, and with Brandon. We'll be back for the next panel. It's a careers panel, which starts at, what's that going to be, 4 o'clock US, 4 o'clock in the UK, 10 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast, and 10 in the evening in Southeast Asia. I hope those times are right. I might be off by that, but we'll be back in 60 minutes for that panel. To all 4 of you, thank you for a great session, really encouraging that sense of possible and what people can achieve. Enjoy the discussions that follow in your respective chat rooms.